Alright, sorry for you ambitious folks. I know that this took me a little while to get it uploaded, but here we go. This is just an introduction to the design brief portion um, under defining the problem. So the first step in our design process, the one that I'm using, is to first identify a problem, which I've done for you, and then to define a problem. So I'm going to walk you through this real quickly to kind of help you with the whole process. It shouldn't be too difficult. Blah, blah. So defining the problem, again, I mentioned earlier that there's many variations of the design process that exist. Um, this is just one. So I understand that anybody that has any interest in engineering of any type has probably seen some sort of design process that's probably different than this one. This is adapted from Project Lead the Way. It's what I use to teach my kids in class. But all of them pretty much require a problem to be defined in some way after it's been recognized. So in order to define the problem, we use what's called a design brief, which is just a concise document which is no more than 1 page long. It identifies the client, clearly states their problem or need, and it details to the degree to which the engineer will carry out the solution. And it also lists any of the rules and limitations within which the engineer must perform. So here's an example design brief. We have our client, the designer, we have a problem statement, a design statement, and the constraints. There's also, if there's room, usually include deliverables, which we'll get through that, what that is here in a minute. And the whole point to this lesson is to kind of give somebody that's interested in designing something, it can be used for anything really. It can be used for something physical like some type of organizer. It could be for a house, it can be for a trash can, it can be for anything really. It doesn't even have to be a physical item, it can be software for some sort of software project, or it can just be a way to organize your thoughts and ideas. So again, the design brief serves as an agreement between the client and the engineer. A lot of times when you're going through a project that you're trying to design and build, you're gonna want to return to this design brief to help kind of keep you on track and gauge your progress and the validity of the creative work that you're doing. So again, you have the client, usually a person, company, organization, or target consumer group whose problem needs required the talents of an engineer or designer to develop some solution. Designer can be anybody that has a problem. Again, engineers are only one type of designer, so this doesn't even apply just to engineering. It really applies to anything. And then in case you were wondering, the definition of engineering design is the application of math, science, and engineering principles to the creation and development of systems, components, and processes. All right, now the problem statement can be kind of tricky. It's got to clearly and concisely identify the problem, but it should never imply or state a solution. So hopefully that makes sense, because obviously the solution is not the problem. So here's an example of a good problem statement that's in the example that I use. So my school locker is a mess. I can never find a pen, pencil, etc. My homework is always getting lost. My lunch gets crushed, blah, blah, blah. Because of that clutter, it's hard to use my locker door or to close my locker door completely. So that's a good problem statement. It doesn't imply a solution. It just says, this is my problem. This is what I need fixed. And then a poor example would be, my locker needs a locker mate so that I can get my locker more organized. In this case, a locker mate's a fictitious brand name of a solution. All right, so a locker mate doesn't actually exist, or I guess it might, or something similar. But in this statement, you're providing a solution, and you don't want to do that in the problem statement. You're simply defining the problem. Then we have our design statement, which is also a little tricky. It challenges you, whoever the designer really, to take action to address the need and solve the problem. It specifies the degree to which you will carry out the solution, and it may also contain an underlying theme or a very important constraint. So, a good design statement should not unintentionally bias the creator's thought process by using terminology that suggests an already existing solution. So kind of similar to the problem statement, but it's more or less about the design than actually defining the problem. So a good design statement is that the designer will design, model, and test a high school locker organization system that will neatly contain items commonly used and kept at school. A poor design statement would be, I'm going to design a locker mate for a high school locker. The purpose would not be to redesign something that already exists, or at least to state that fact. You don't want to tell somebody, yes, I'm going to take an item that already exists and recreate it or redesign it. It kind of biases your thoughts, your ideas, and it also implies to the client that the solution already exists and you're really not doing any work. Which that may in fact be the case. You might end up just being innovative on a concept that already exists or an item that already exists that you could use as the solution. Then we have constraints. Constraints give the designer an unlimited amount of time, or I'm sorry, giving an engineer an unlimited amount of time and money to complete a job is impractical, so there's obviously always limitations that must be imposed. Constraints can be thought of as guidelines that must be followed or rules that must not be broken. So some example constraints, and I apologize for this, it's actually a PowerPoint that I'm viewing in Google Documents or Google Slides, so it's going to look a little messed up. But any time or budget, any established codes like building codes that you might have to follow, if there's anything you have to make, or any processes that you have to do or have to avoid doing, if there's any physical attributes, meaning if it has to contain a certain color, must be of a certain weight or size, it must look a certain way, and it must meet safety concerns. Typically constraints are listed in a like a list form, so they can be added as the design process plays itself out. It's not strict. It's not something that has to stay exactly the same all the way through. Even the client might come up with different constraints or things as you move forward, and you have to adapt to that. So it's more or less a flexible thing, but there's typically a few constraints that you must follow. And then last, you have deliverables, which are any initial sketches or models that you make, technical drawings, PowerPoint summaries of a presentation that you have to give. And again, this is just an idea for this project. You don't actually have to do all these deliverables. We're simply doing steps 1 and 2, which are defining a problem and brainstorming. So your job then is to take a look at the sample that I have here. So you've seen the problem statement, you see a design statement, how they modeled it after the problem, you see what constraints they came up with, and it's all made up, it's fictitious. If you're doing an actual project, you'll come up with actual constraints that mean something to the project you're doing, but there's really no worries about it. It's more or less just kind of learning to use this as a way to organize your thoughts and get everything down on paper. So your job then is to take the problem that I have listed on the website, or on our website, and kind of fill out this design brief based on the problem statement that I gave you. And there's a template that has all this stuff listed on there for you. You can just download that, fill it out, and just send it to me as an email, since we can't upload anything ourselves. Or you can attach it to a file, or attach it to a post on the discussion board at the end of the lesson. So that's it. If you have any questions, feel free to send me an email. I can help you out with any of this stuff. It shouldn't be too difficult. Again, it's just an idea for you, and an easy way to learn to define a problem and really kind of start the communication between a client and a designer. And the client might even be yourself. Like, let's say you're going to design an organization system for your desk at home. You can even just write this stuff down. It doesn't take very long, and it really helps you to organize your ideas. So I hope this helps. Thanks.